That's not a good start, unfortunately, because a bigger and more bloated cabinet with new ministers and new deputy ministers means a lot more startup time for the newcomers to get to learn how the system works and what their job is and so on and so forth, which means the economy is going to now take the second stage until the ministers and the new cabinets are rearranging. When we talk about functions going from one place to another, like the disabled and children going from one department to social welfare, that's not a quick fix. That's not a quick process. So I think, likewise in the Ministry of Finance, we have not only a new Minister of Finance, of course he has been there for more than 10 years, but his deputy is certainly new. It will take time for him to take his arm around the issues. And that means more delays and a slower start to implementation. So overall, my impression is a bit, I'm surprised.
All right, and we'll get to the specific ministries in a moment. Let's talk about the dynamic of these deputy ministers that has been introduced. We now have a few more departments that have that have two deputy ministers. What do you think is the need for that, Sipho Seepe?
Well, if you take justice, it has been combined with correctional services. So these were two separate ministries. So it's when you bring them together, I would have anticipated that it would be too much work. So that you can actually explain how combining that and having one ministry, that you end up with two deputies. And even in other areas, that same discourse that the president addresses. For instance, when he talks about land and rural development, he has said that this would be one of the key areas. And he says that because of the enormity of the task, he had combined the two. But the issue with the deputy ministers, because ultimately the work is done in the department, sometimes we confuse a policy setting environment, which might not require too many people. You may require many people in the conceptualization of policy. But once the policy is started, you do not need so many deputy ministers. So the one could actually quibble with that. But at the same time, you also see that it is also a way of accommodating a number of people. I mean, you see here some former president of NUM. The person has moved from there to being a minister, full minister, which is really unusual, because normally you find people moving from outside to either becoming chairs of portfolios to understand how government works, then they become deputy ministers, then they go. But in this case, you've seen something else. There were people like Buitman Mela, that comes as no surprise, that you do need to inject the new cabinet with new people, but also to give a sense of hope that if you work hard, there is a reward. But I think one is still reading from the shock of the bloatedness, as opposed to what we had already imagined as the notion of lean and trim. But the other thing that we see, we also noticed that Mukonyane, who had lost out as a premier, she has also been deployed, you could say rewarded, to a full ministry. But she is no newcomer, so that is also easy to understand. And also water and sanitation is a very important portfolio. So somebody who has been at the provincial level, at the level of delivery, etc., you'll see that the person will get in there almost land and they will run easily.
You deserve to know more.
ENCA.com